Jacques' seedy death has upset the emerging relationship between Aiden and Emma. Aiden only wants to escape, to lick his wounds. In this chapter, we listen to Aiden's internal monologue as he finds himself in the worst place imaginable for someone with autism, between two irreconcilable sets of facts in his mind. One set describes utter bliss and the other, utter despair. Chapter 18, In-Betweenness. Aiden sat in the front room while a police officer talked to Emma in the hallway. Two officers in his hearing shared untoward details. A tape of her in the midget's VCR. The painter's febrile brain swelled. He could not put a single fact to what he saw during the evening. Yet on meeting Jacques at Spyglass Darkly House the night before, the trespasser left the impression there was more to the estranged acquaintance with the photographer than was freely confessed. An officer examined the message tally on the phone machine and, suspecting Aiden of eavesdropping, kept his remark to a fellow officer serviceably brief.
Leave it for the detective.
Another car pulled up outside. It was Seth Bowles, and it was more than the dejected suitor could endure to see the professor in the apartment.
What's your connection here?
The officer asked the new arrival. Seth announced, somewhat possessively.
I am a good friend.
The same officer turned to Aiden and said,
You're free to go.
It was the painter's opportunity to leave, but the professor blocked his way.
It must be terrible for her,
ventured Seth. Aiden nodded, not wanting to speak for fear any embellishment would provoke more questions.
Emma tells me you're a painter.
The older man probed.
Where did you do your MFA?
It was an odd topic at such a moment, but was answered. Indiana University.
A good program, then.
Aiden responded to the insincere approval of his school choice. The only thing that matters as an artist is having something to say.
Do you exhibit anywhere?
Pressed the rival.
Do you exhibit in Chicago?
Did.
Did?
He repeated.
Did you run out of things to say?
The receiver of this pert remark was unscathed. Though Aiden was timid around authority figures, they never impressed him. A police officer stepped between the two and asked the professor to move his car, blocking the drive. Before Seth returned outside to comply, he spoke honestly to the painter.
We have more in common than you imagine.
The moment did not afford time for in-depth character appraisals, for in wanting to spare himself further humiliation, Aiden aimed in the same direction as his rival. Emma's pitiful look caught him at the door. Swallowing his pride, he took the fingers offered him. Their pained attitude seeped into his palm. Her head found his shoulder. The awkward embrace made her resemble a board, threatening splinters. Are you leaving? She asked. He cobbled together a reply. I feel I need to. There was a pause on her end, a disappointed pause. If you must. It's for the best. His proclamation felt more like a dispassionate assessment of the situation than a grudging sacrifice of his wishes. Her response was haggard. This obsession thing with Jacques, it's more than I can deal with. What Jacques did, it was about him, not you. Emma sighed. Why is it all the wrong men fall in love with me? Aiden assumed he was just another wrong man and resented the unsolicited rejection. He dropped his arms to release her in relief. I must be going. Seth's reappearance at the door was enough to send him hobbling down the steps outside. Harold Pincher stood on the sidewalk below. The accompanying officers parted like stage curtains to ripen his effect.
Ah, Mr. Gage,
sang he.
You've been in our hamlet but 3 days, and I've seen you as many times.
Affecting a pose, his gaze rose to where the professor was still visible in the doorway above.
Clinging too long to youth is a sin. Wouldn't you agree?
Aiden felt the pointy end of this remark, too. He was in no humor for a second sparring partner, so turned huffing up the block. A smirking fellow with a microphone came running at him from an open van across the street. "What does the death of the midget have to do with the woman in this house?" No comment. He persisted. "The police say they found scads of sex tapes in his trailer. Are you one of the guys in the videos?" "What?" The reporter explained. "I've heard she's had 100 men." He crowed, glaring at a cameraman. "Are you getting this?" Aiden, dropping into his Saturn, bristled. No comment. He was halfway down the block before realizing the news van kept pace. Speeding onto Broadway, an opportune crowd of crunchy granola types bustled outside the doors of Being and Nothingness, with placards protesting the use of dairy products inside the establishment. One sign read, "Stop the enslavement of cows." Another, "Drink soy." Despite their pleas, the coffee house was in the middle of a rush. The absconder traded his car for the cover of the mob, thereby losing his pesky pursuers. Reflex more than relief had him queuing up for coffee. He was late remembering that Erica covered Emma's shift. The barista wanted an update. "How's Emma?" "Okay." "Did the police kick you out?" "No." "So you left her to the wolves?" "Seth is with her," he mumbled. "Seth?" Aiden forgot about the three-way nature of the relationship. "You should take some coffee to her," she insisted. Erica, the patron reasoned, did not want Emma alone with Seth, and was attempting to employ him as a wedge. He resented being used as a fourth leg on a table in which he shared no part. Before she commenced the second drink, he blurted, "I'm not going back." Erica noted his terseness. "Are you so busy today?" He did not answer when any answer would have ended the conversation. She took his non-reply the way he intended. "What kind of person bails on a friend in her hour of need?" He threw it back without thinking. "More of a friend to her than you." Erica was pulled up short by the retort. "What the hell does that mean?" "I saw you and the professor at the party." The complaint leveled at her, that of betrayal, where he believed Emma exercised a prior claim on the dalliance, was judged immaterial by the accused. Squinting out from under layers of mascara, she puzzled. "What makes you think Emma and I are such good friends anyway?" He shared in her bafflement. "You came to lunch with us." The girl almost laughed. "I did that as a favor. She was trying to set me up with you." Aiden could not hide his disapproval of the notion. Erica circled her wagons, too. "You're not my type either." He faded from the counter without his drink, careening in the direction of the door and crowded sidewalk. Aiden drove back to Spyglass Darkly House in a black mood. He went to his studio and placed Emma's photograph on his work table. It was in his mind to pin it to the wall, but Emma deserved no such honor. It both angered and disheartened him to think she had so little inkling of his character as to imagine him agreeable to a liaison with a chain-smoking thrift store poser. The painter paced instead of rocked. His thoughts barely kept up with his steps. What the reporter said about 100 lovers was nonsense, yet it was the sort of poisonous accusation that found rich soil in the suitor's heart. Rapid speculation was too much a pattern for him, the overthinking of an underacting man. Imagination was Aiden's friend in art, but his enemy in everything else. He was reluctant to expose himself to injuries he could otherwise avoid, and this timidity or cowardice invariably brought out the worst in women. Lovers readily confused his silence with acceptance of their terms, and what began with little discussion unfailingly ended with no discussion at all. The distressed man was torn into 1,000 pieces, 1,000 familiar pieces. It was a vicious cycle for him, one that made keeping his distance from women a prudent course where extenuating factors such as boyfriends and lovers were involved. They were not simply irritating obstacles, but also demeaning by demonstration of their unremarkable character. The idealistic artist had chosen a lonely life, largely because he was finicky, perhaps too exacting in his dating criteria. He suspected the females who were attracted to him over the years would have been just as happy with less, if not happier. Any judgment he would likely render on the woman's taste in suitors would give him only the slimmest satisfaction, while being completely immaterial to the woman. He tied his happiness, his salvation, irrevocably to young women, and it was increasingly a losing proposition as he aged. The drift of time further separated him from his objects of regard. He grew older while they remained obstinately the same age. Even if he no longer had stated interest in pursuing relationships with younger women, his inexhaustible idealization of them showed no signs of abating. What was dropping out of the picture was the middle part, the particular individual. Experience had something to do with it, but Aiden believed, given his faint-hearted attempts at dating, the middle part was never intended to work out. The accumulative annoyances of his few romantic unions, though sufferable at first, slowly calloused into the conviction that he lacked the necessary virtue of subsumption, so vital in making relationships work. The pedestrian aspects of domesticity loomed like gathering clouds in his imagination, and picturing them on the horizon was enough to deaden any short-lived pang that such indignities could be anything but tedious. And what manner of woman, he wondered, could make them otherwise? At bottom, the irreconcilable duality of women, with the romantic ideal at one end and the sexual object at the other, was the bane of his existence, and it was a chasm that did not diminish with age but grew. The more intense the feelings were at either end, the less likely any middle ground could be carved out. Ideals could be so idealized that the woman they were attached to could be politely ignored. Conversely, the same could be done less politely with objects. Love made the painter a mindless slave, and lust, potentially, a mindless tyrant. Yet it was more than the foibles and vagaries of Emma's youth that riled him. It was his hurt feelings. He loved her unreservedly from the beginning, had seen her as someone deserving of his love. By comparison, she saw him as someone to be handed off to another woman. This is what was so obvious to Emma and not to him. This is what she intended to tell him earlier at the bedroom closet. She cared nothing for him. Aiden was a fly in a bottle, and wound up in his bedroom rocking in front of the telephone. He stopped periodically to pick up the receiver and cradle it to his ear, like the barrel of a revolver. Eventually, he augmented this routine by dialing 6 of 7 phone digits before hanging up. This variation went on for a while until the last digit was added. However, the number was only allowed to make it halfway around the rotary dial before the call was terminated. After 40 minutes of this excruciating roulette, he let the last digit drop.
This is the Personal Touch Maid Service Agency.
He hung up without leaving Amber a message. The strand of her hair, which he placed on the pillow as a confidence-building measure, was returned to his jacket pocket. For reasons that could not be named, the brooder parked near Jacques' eyesore of a trailer. There he watched police load the last of the dwarf's belongings into a forensics van. He stayed low in his car seat and ambled over inconspicuously for a closer look once the police cleared off. The trailer was empty, but for a few porno magazines and Jacques' creative milk crate furniture. A crooked nail protruded from a wall and was presumably where a rope was slung for the asphyxiation. As the trespasser stepped lightly over the left-behinds, his shoe stabbed at the glossy page of an open centerfold in his way. A word, carved in sharp ballpoint pen, leapt off the nude woman's body. Blind. Aiden keeled forward, running fingers through more pages of the pornographic magazine. The same word covered another nude, and another. He rifled through other magazines and found more of the same. Staggering outside, he tripped over a plastic flower pot and pivoted. A trash can was toppled alongside the dinky trailer. High weeds around it were baited with videotapes. Gathering these, the haul was dumped in the backseat of his car, and he sped away. The tapes were dropped among the sofa cushions. One at random was carried to the VCR and shoved in. The screen was dark, but crinkled white lines indicated that the cassette indeed played. Nothing of substance was gleaned, either from adjusting the contrast or fast-forwarding in play mode. Aiden worked his way through the pile of videos to find them all frustratingly the same. It had been taking shape in his mind all morning and harkened back to the far-fetched theory Omar floated in Chicago about a reality TV show. If Aiden's new life was subject to the machinations of television producers, then their program was unlike any he ever encountered. They were not only invading his thoughts, but also his nightmares. Had these villains gotten to his sleeping pills, food, and drink to spike them with hallucinogenic drugs? His desire to avoid confrontation made him a natural patsy. Everyone from his evil tenant neighbor to deceitful women saw him coming a mile off. He was easily cheated and manipulated because he could not be bothered to attend to his affairs. It was simpler to trust or hope to trust in others than it was to ask sensible and timely questions. Aiden screamed as he circled unorganized paperwork pertaining to the house. After stumbling over the phone number of the foreign lawyer several times, he dialed the number and found it disconnected.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
A thorough examination of the house commenced. Closets were rooted through, furniture overturned, lampshades unscrewed, rugs pulled up. Nothing resembling a microphone or hidden camera was found. His excavation only succeeded in stirring up his dust allergy. The hapless resident cursed himself and was amazed by how, in the haze of a schoolboy crush, he allowed the rude reality to pile up at his doorstep. His reason could never circumscribe his runaway emotions in these states, and any healed-over furuncle was a subject to revisit. 1 minute he was yelling at a drawer for banging his elbow, and the next berating people of no or former acquaintance for past unaddressed grievances. By the end of his tirade, he simply threw things as he stormed blindly and ranted. Several forceful points would be made in these vocalizations, and being struck by his impeccable logic, he repeated them, and repeated them again, as if rehearsing lines for a debate. Anyone listening in would be confused by how these extemporaneous monologues dropped out in places, like he was getting distracted by other forming points. But instead of picking up where he left off, he recommenced from the start. This broken record oratory was far from cathartic, since his expositions might go on for hours, and even carry on in his head to deprive him of sleep. Physical exhaustion generally succeeded in ending these performances. On occasion, a flare-up in his acid reflux proved instrumental. The stressed man retreated to the bathroom to swig down a quarter bottle of antacid. A Loratadine tablet was also taken for his allergy. The diminution of light meant the whole day was spent unproductively reducing the property to shambles. Yet Aiden could neither undo his mess nor think about anything else. Defeated, he plopped down on his living room sofa and scrutinized one of Jacques' video cassettes on the coffee table, as if it contained a devious plot already finished but for the punchline. It occurred to him with rough clarity that, if he was being interfered with, then perhaps the tables could be turned. Instead of cowering and waiting for the next blow, instead of following the script of the clueless victim, he would initiate a confrontation on his terms. Inspired, or merely desperate, he dashed up the stairs with the cassette and a plan. The camcorder was pulled from the closet and set up by the bed, and the tape slapped into its compartment. It was already as good as night, and without a working alarm clock, it would be difficult to carve out a nap in darkness better suited for proper sleep. One plan required another. Aiden returned downstairs to grab a wider candle from the box by the kitchen door and placed it on a ceramic plate. Both items were taken upstairs and set on the bed table.
A spare blade for his utility knife was wedged into wax about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the candle. A glass marble was balanced on the flat, protruding edge of the blade.
The painter was a light sleeper, and his thinking was that when the candle melted down to loosen the blade, it and the marble would clap loudly on the plate. He switched on the camcorder before lighting the wick and proceeded to the bathroom.
Using an emery board, a small portion of a sleeping pill was filed off. It was not clear what Aiden hoped to accomplish by recording over the mysterious video, or whether he would take enough of the pill to matter. No sooner had he filled his water glass than the bedside telephone rang. He picked up the receiver guardedly. Hello?
Aiden, it's Amber.
She sounded close. Are you in town? He asked.
I'm at the Peekaboo Motel. My client canceled. I saw where you called my machine without leaving a message. I didn't call you back because I knew I'd be driving down.
Aiden blew out the candle. I was hoping to talk to you.
Do you want to meet here at the motel? I already have a room.
He waffled, yet could not say, even with his suspicions, if Amber was part of the conspiracy. Her admission about where she was at least convinced him she was not hiding inside the house.
It's just a talk, of course,
she added as an inducement.
Aiden prepared to leave the house, yet did not escape without incident. Stepping into the hallway, its light failed. He checked both switches, but the bulb was blown.
Unlit stairs were manageable in daylight, but perilous after dark. The tenant troubled over disturbing the grieving caretaker in this matter. He opted to leave a note taped to his front door, as this was judged less intrusive than a doorbell summons. Chapter 19. The Unsayable, Part 1.
Under the best circumstances, it was difficult for Aiden to transition out of obsessive states. What distinguished many of his peculiar behaviors from those of others were not the behaviors themselves. An occasional behavior is not the same as a pervasive behavior. Where one is an anecdote of shared experience, the other continuously disrupts or prevents a normal life and requires lifelong coping mechanisms. More unique to Aiden was his proclivity for runaway paranoia. Dark ideas overtook his reason for short periods. A prevailing sense of catastrophe, of being watched, of having his body or property violated by natural or nefarious means. These concerns were never far from his mind, whether washing his hands to elude germs or crossing the street to avoid staring strangers. The world, his world, imparted little sense of security. What prevented him from being schizophrenic was that he perfectly comprehended his irrationality when it occurred, yet was powerless to set it aside. Here, too, he was forced to second-guess his doubts about his new situation.
Although it had been Omar who raised the specter of surveillance and plots.
Amber told him she was in the honeymoon suite, but in gazing up at a row of motel doors, the visitor remembered all the rooms bore this designation. Entering the front office, a bank of muted TV monitors accosted him at the desk. All save one chronicled the exploits of lovers in the various rooms. A wiry, dandruff-speckled man emerged out of a back room, finishing a dripping taco.
No vacancies, he announced. I'm to meet someone here, someone who has a room.
The clerk scowled.
Can't give out that information.
Aiden glanced at the one monitor with the dark screen. No vacancies? He repeated.
No vacancies.
Mud flaps of pickup trucks suggested an additional layer of prophylactic along the lot line. Yet it was the peeling wrought iron stairs that oriented him and placed him on the second level. The door at the far end stood ajar. Darkness in its crack confirmed his hunch. Amber? Her name dropped over the threshold to a mottled yet durable carpet. It garnered no reply. He traced a shining seam of neon to an unlit table lamp. "Leave it," came her hushed command. A finger lifted, breaking from a larger shadow. "That's another precaution." Aiden looked to where she pointed. A pillowcase covered a wall-mounted video camera in the corner. Her slink put her at the edge of the bed. "Like I said, I work for an agency. They wouldn't approve of me being here on their clock." The visitor puzzled at the cloak and dagger. "Sit," she said, patting the disconcertingly small mattress. Her calm tone halved the remaining distance between them. "If we are going to talk, we need to be comfortable." He waded out of a muddle. "I can't be comfortable." "You mean you can't be comfortable with me?" "I mean I can't be comfortable with people, in general." "Why?" Aiden turned to the bed table and then to the window. By the time he turned back, he was pacing. "Most people say too little for me to abide," he confessed. "What do you need others to tell you?" He was not sure specifically what he meant. "Sit," she repeated. Aiden acquiesced. Amber took his hand. "Why did you call without leaving a message?" Mumbling, he replied, "I never think through why I do anything. I only second-guess myself afterwards." "Is all this to do with the girl, who is not your girlfriend?" He spoke frankly. "I've chosen unwisely." "Unwisely? How?" "All my life I've been in love with an ideal. As I've grown older, my ideal hasn't changed, while I have. It is with this girl that I appreciate how wide the gap has grown." "Then your ideal must evolve too." "I suppose, if that's even possible." The masseuse rose to ease him down on the bed. "You need to relax," she insisted. His shoes were removed to facilitate her attention to his socked feet. He was quickly swimming against the dark current, against her. "Why did you drop out of art school, Amber?" "To be honest, I preferred recreational science to my art survey courses." "Recreational science? Are we speaking euphemistically?" Shadow only went so far in erecting a curtain between them. "You have that look," she observed. "A look?" "A look that would like to reform me." "Your life is your own." "You disapprove," she said. "Do you need my approval?" He withdrew first one leg from her grasp and then the other. Abruptly, he resembled a shellfish. The masseuse responded by pushing down both his knees and crawling over him in her stilettos. When he did not squirm, she straddled his waist and allowed her full weight to sink into his pelvis. Her thought was only completed when she was certain she had his undivided attention. "You disapprove because you're attracted to me." The fishnet hosiery gave him a surfeit of contour lines to choose from, and the artist could not think of a more excellent drawing assignment in perspective. "You're an attractive woman," he began, "and smart." "And?" "And," he continued less confidently, "I would wish more for you." "Which would be what?" "I can hardly say." Her vice tightened at his waist, recalibrating. "You can blame my stepfather for the way I turned out. He was my first lover." Aiden's body became barbed wire. "And you've dedicated your life to chasing after him in bed?" She grinned at his show of emotion. "I do have a thing for older men." That can't be good, said he.
Older men?
No, he amended the remark. The part about you chasing after your stepfather in bed. The massage had stopped in the course of this candid exchange, and for what little the would-be client could see of his masseuse, she was a blank screen. He judged the silence harshly and finessed his meaning. I don't judge you. I judge him.
So you should. He was a beastly man, apart from being good in the sack.
You have nothing to do with him now.
He impregnated me when I was a teen. After that, I moved in with Annette and never saw him again.
Is this the child you mentioned in Chicago? Is this the source of your regret? Amber dissembled.
This is not the child I wish to talk about.
Aiden's face flattened on the pillow. The stage scenery shifted with her weight, but his submissive posture left him little leverage.
What was your relationship like with your mother when you were younger?
Her words dissected. We already discussed my mother.
But then, not now.
Am I back on the shrink's couch? He complained. What kind of therapist are you? Anyway, I'm not clear on that. She pressed.
When you think of yourself as a boy, what impression do you remember most strongly of your mother?
Define impression.
Do you think of being in her arms?
I have no recollections of that sort. I didn't like being touched as a child.
Do you have recollections of her punishing you?
Most children are spanked by their mothers.
So you recall those occasions?
I don't understand the point of this.
That's why you're an ass man,
she declared. What?
The way you were looking at me in the hallway in Chicago.
What does a woman's anatomy have to do with my mother whipping me as a child? Amber laid out her theory.
When you were a tyke, all you saw of your mother from the floor was her hips and ass, to which some part of you naturally wanted to cling. Perhaps your mother did not force affection on you, but she did physically interact with you when she punished you. Therefore, your contact with female anatomy has largely been an unpleasant one.
You get all this from a glance at your backside and one night of pillow talk?
Just as a child acquires immunities through his mother's milk, a mother's arms impart other forms of armor,
she informed him.
Boys who spend a lot of time in their mother's arms tend to be boob men, and generally have fewer phobias, such as a fear of heights.
Did Omar tell you about that? The prostitute expounded.
You're a bottom dweller, you see, always looking up at a heaven you can't have.
Aiden laughed guardedly, but was struck to refute her argument. She stroked his still, youthful face.
Would you like to be my backdoor man?
He blushed. I could never afford you, Amber.
You're not a client.
She was miles ahead.
We can meet at this motel on a regular basis, if you want, halfway between Chicago and Stone's Throw.
The manifold that enveloped him was peculiar. He pictured his graphite pencil redrawing any number of these nylon threads running down Amber's foreshortened thighs. Yet the artist judged these contours as being no better than tangents, where they grazed and did not penetrate their subject. It was a pleasing grid, admittedly, though the non-Euclidean geometry fell into dim confusion where it met with no gusset or liner under the short skirt. He fidgeted and agitated aromatics on Amber's skin. Sex has never been the beginning of anything for me, came his unmodulated proclamation. She pressed a finger to his lips and, in complete candor, said, If we start sleeping together, keep sleeping together, it will be the beginning to something. He contemplated other challenges, but her weight against him had elicited an involuntary and unambiguous reaction. One side of her mouth entertained the ideal of a smile, and she slid forward. The feel of synthetic hosiery against the teeth of his pants zipper was more mental than molecular. He could not get past the nylon's artifice, its texture, and how it was ill-suited to dissipate perspiration in a prolonged embrace. Pushing on her knees, she released him.
He withdrew to the buttressing headboard. Amber could not hide her frustration. She leaned away, even as her gaze penetrated deeper.
I'm hiding nothing from you, Aiden. I'm speaking my heart. Isn't that what you want? Isn't this what your comfort requires?
What he was uncomfortable with was the abruptness of her proposition. He could not fathom her eagerness to sleep with him, or her forthrightness in confessing it. Never in his life had a woman's words and actions matched so perfectly. Regardless, the dark trappings of the lure kept him wary and distrustful. The prostitute gestured toward the door.
I brought a suitcase with me.
Aiden glanced at the rectangular object set off by neon under the door sill. She probed his curiosity.
What do you want me to pull out of it? What aphrodisiac will do the trick?
Are you a magician too?
With a man like you, I have to seduce your mind before you will let me anywhere near your body.
With something you would pull out of a suitcase.
Or not.
He was confused. She explained.
Sometimes only imagination is needed.
What's in the suitcase? He asked point blank.
Money?
Money?
Yours.
Mine? The man tittered. What? So I can pay your fee?
Wouldn't money change the dynamic between us? If you don't feel you deserve me as a poor man, then maybe being a rich man would change everything.
He quibbled with her caricature of his male motives. It isn't that I don't deserve you, but I don't deserve her.
Her?
The woman's shadowy look was suddenly one of derision.
You're afraid you're going to lose your ideal.
Emma, he said. Her name is Emma.
Do you intend to confess your feelings to Emma?
He mumbled in the direction of a reply. She broadened the scope of the inquiry.
Can you picture yourself sleeping with her?
When I'm around her, that isn't on my mind. Amber skirted it.
But do you think of her when you're by yourself, when the lights are out?
No more pop psychology, he demanded. The prostitute was determined.
Why don't you think about her? Is it because you feel like you don't even deserve her in your private thoughts?
Her voice narrowed in.
Who do you think about when the lights are out?
The men's responses were pared down to inaudible nods.
Haven't you been thinking about me lately?
She volunteered.
Isn't that the reason why you called?
Nods gave way to immobility and to an expression as blank as the motel headboard. She assessed the push-pull.
I think you are exactly where you want to be in all this.
He took the bait. What do you mean?
The golden means you mentioned before,
she conjectured.
In this regard, none exist. There are two irreconcilable women in your head. One you see in the clouds, and another you call out from under your bed at night. I dare say you're not eager to give up either one. You've grown too comfortable with your mental constructs.
He frowned. Mental constructs? She sighed.
You had me going with all your talk of shyness. I suspect your timidity not only spares you from the possibility of being rejected, but also from the inconvenience of not being rejected. There is virtue, if not passion, in knowing precisely what you want, and safety, if not salvation, in knowing it is too precise to be had.
Now you're a philosopher.
No,
she was brusque.
I want to get you off.
I don't want to be a test case for your new profession.
Like I said, you're not a client.
If this is not business, then it's personal.
I'm offering you more than hand-holding and candy hearts, Aiden. I'm offering to be whoever you want in this dark room.
It's more than that, too, if it's personal. Amber was now the one being evasive. She backed away to the footboard and huffed.
Why did you come here if you didn't want to get busy?
Aiden fled to the bathroom to splash cold water in his face. Noisy bed springs in the next room resembled augers boring through the wall. He attempted to drown it out with the tap, but the throws jumped past his shoulder to pour from a busted speaker behind him. Amber had turned on the TV. Sickly colors spilled over the vacated bed, while expletives
like invading poorer relations, left no corner of the room unoccupied. The therapist had followed the retreating shadows to the exterior wall, and in squaring her back with the exit door, her face stayed out of the pulsating light. A piece of the televised vivisection was glimpsed from the bathroom doorway. His reaction to it, far from being titillated, was one of nightmare. The jowls of a toothless grandfather gumming his porridge came to mind. Or something darker. The prostitute maintained her shadowy anonymity while strolling to the television to switch it off.
"What scares you,"
She began in the instructional silence.
"is relinquishing control."
He circled around her, chiming dissonantly in a creaking chair while he laced his shoes.
"As I said in Chicago,"
She continued.
"what is needed in love is faith."
Trust, you mean?
Yes, isn't that what we've been talking about?
If this is about trust, then tell me about your escort service.
I won't be working for them much longer.
But who are they? He snapped, pointing at the cloaked video camera bracketed to the cornice. Who are the people you don't want looking in?
This isn't about them.
This is personal, he mocked.
Since I fell in love with you, yes.
The easy profession was another broadside. I don't know you.
You do.
You keep saying that.
I'm your ideal.
You keep saying that too.
How well do you know her?
She argued.
You've known me for as long as you've known her. Isn't that why you're here? Because, like her, I'm an unknown quantity? Isn't that what your ideal is about? Something more in your mind than in your experience? Something that benefits from a lack of specifics? Isn't that what you need to proceed?
He could only answer with, "You would be the first to say that the heart is illogical, Amber." She looked momentarily deflated, sinking to the edge of the bed.
You say that because you're thinking from here, not there. When we are there together, it will be different.
Turning to the door, Aiden's hand lit on the doorknob, but did not turn it. She smiled cautiously.
You're the kind of man who can call a woman in the middle of the night and talk for hours without ever saying what he wants to say. Yet you and I have shared more truth in this dark room than you are ever likely to share with any woman in daylight.
We have shared no truth, he countered.
Perhaps not the truth of words.
With the doorknob still in his hand, he muttered under his breath, I've never confessed my heart to a woman.
You have.
Aiden met her eyes.
The drawing of the monster you gave me in Chicago. I love you was written on it.
Momentarily, he believed he had unintentionally given her Bray's drawing, but then remembered his drawing from childhood, which he kept in his journal as a tattered bookmark. I gave you that drawing? He gasped.
It was no accident,
she insisted. Are you saying my inner child is sending you crush notes behind my back?
More like your id sending me an SOS.
He sighed. I might be a lost cause, Amber.
In your art, you mix a little hate with your love, Aiden. You need to learn how to do what you do at the easel in real life.
You sound like Omar.
But it's true.
She expanded on her suggestion.
Think of it like your golden means. You need to balance your affection for the opposite sex with a healthy measure of disaffection. Toss in a smidgen of antipathy with your admiration. Sometimes the only way to save your soul is by giving the devil his pound of flesh.
And you want to be the devil girl who pushes my buttons.
I do have a closet full of costumes.
He entertained the notion of a smile. She coolly announced,
I have another client to meet.
He was now more blocking than leading the way out of the room. If you cure me, Amber, I may stop painting monsters, maybe stop painting altogether.
Then it will be the art world's loss and your gain.
I love my monsters. Shouldn't I suffer for them?
Isn't it the other way round? They suffer for you and spare you the full brunt of your frailty and feeling? If you suffered more, I'm certain we would already be lovers.
Her insight was as unsettling as her straightforwardness. Amber, seizing on his hesitation, eased to the door and let her fingers light tenderly on his forearm. "You didn't come here for sex." He was never sure what was in his mind, but believed what she said was more true than not. "I don't," he stammered hesitantly. "I don't like you being with other men." Her breath cleared the collar of his shirt, caressing his neck. "Jealousy is a good first step." Aiden's nose almost touched her forehead. There was enough light to sketch in general details, but it was a face more template than one personally known to him. "Why don't you want me to see you in the light?" he asked searchingly. "Because you would be afraid." He stuck his free hand down in his jacket pocket in a fiddle, forgetting about the strand of the prostitute's hair still tucked in its lining. Rubbing it between his fingers, it was both close and far away in that moment, but Aiden could not figure where this descriptive aspect placed him. "I'm allergic to some fragrances," he admitted. "Do you want me not to wear perfume when we're together?" He called himself answering the first part of the question. "No, I want you to wear it." She tugged on his hand, attempting to coax it around her waist, but the unseen strand of hair, like a talisman, kept her at arm's length. He straightened up but blustered weakly. "How can I trust you when you know more about me than I know about you?" His asking was meeker this time. "What's in the suitcase?" His companion knelt to unclasp the fastener and push open the lid. "I have nothing to hide." "What frightens me," he muttered, "is your face is just as empty to me as the interior of that case. I cannot make out what it means." "Turn on the light then," she said, "if it will help." Darkness had encouraged candidness. Light, he feared, would invite recklessness. Aiden exited the room.
No other utterance came from Amber, not that it was heard. Harder rain unleashed a fury over the parking lot, leaving the rooftop signage twanging on its tension wires. The weather urged him down the metal stairs, and once removed to his car, he sulked over a half-turned ignition key. Momentarily, Miss Monet, shielded by an umbrella, descended the same steps with her empty suitcase. With little delay, she was away across the splashing pavement in her Lexus. Aiden followed at a guarded distance. The road forward captured his frayed nerves. The storm's savagery caused rain to repel off the asphalt with velocity, thereby vaporizing the lower half of vehicular traffic. Amber's taillights were only intermittently visible.
Their tracker's concentration similarly waxed and waned while he mulled over what had passed for confession between prostitute and client.
Orange flares interrupted this meditation, and then the flashing light of a service truck. A billboard for Peekaboo Putt-Putt had fallen in the wind to bring down power lines. Workmen used a winch and rope to hoist the obstruction and clear the highway, which allowed Amber to squeeze through the bottleneck before him. When he reached the place, where the old and new highway forked, he had no idea whether she turned toward Stone's Throw or back toward Chicago. The rain mostly subsided once Aiden crossed into town, and where he lost one trail, he set off after another. It was difficult to assess the Bowles residence in the pinkish-gray dusk, but in passing its bay windows and eldritch porch, movement in an upstairs window provoked the arrival. He did not drive far, but parked up the block. The professor's studio window was readily identified, though of the ghostly white form in it, he was less certain. It exhibited a statuesque pose, and was this Emma modeling in her wedding dress? Without compunction, Aiden stepped to the side of the property, less exposed to the street. Divots from his accomplice's mismatched high heels were still turned up in the soft earth around the rear door, where they had made their dramatic exit days before. Ducking out of a thornier drizzle was excuse for cover. The stranglehold past this sheltering doorway offered little deterrent against climbing its dim, steep-pitched stairs. Conversation was not heard on the other side of the door at the top, and this was fortuitous since the invader inadvertently shoved it open. He stepped into better light and was dismayed to find himself draped in cobwebs. It occurred to him that this rear entrance to the house provided means for the philandering professor to come and go from his studio with minimal detection. By evidence of the light infestation, he had not used it that day. The dress in the window proved to be only a white drape. Its delicateness looked out of place against Bowles' muscular black canvases. Scanning the walls, the trespasser could not recall precisely where its door connecting to the hallway resided.
It hid under one of several oversized paintings.
There was no compelling reason to linger on the property, but anger incapacitated Aiden. A utility knife sat on a work table, yet if an act of desecration crossed his mind, a reckoning of footsteps checked this impulse. What he heard was surely the tap of a walking cane on stair treads in the undiscoverable hallway, indicating the presence of Mrs. Bowles in the house. This methodical sound was at first consistent with a slow, careful ascent.
But suddenly, the stick began to rap wildly and rapidly, increasing in volume as its wielder approached the studio door.
Immediately, one of the black canvases shimmied. An unseen doorknob rattled behind it. How was it possible that the resident invalid could make it up the stairs so quickly and assault the door with such ferocity? The large painting was on the point of toppling when the tip of her cane, now constrained in its violence, penetrated a gap between door and jamb.
It crept toward him like a finger. Aiden was already falling backwards through his exit and down the secret stairs. His brazen intrusion only caught up with him at the car.
A quadrille of dead leaves whirled around the front door of Spyglass Darkley House. This, with any mercy, was the last hurrah of the cloudburst. Past the foyer, light was restored to the stairs. A note was taped to the newel.
Came by to check things out. A breaker tripped in the fuse box, and I reset it. Andrew Tommen.
A loud splat greeted the resident at his bedroom doorway. The bedside lamp revealed a water spot spreading outward from the ceiling light fixture. A second bigger spot was on the bedspread. Aiden stared up with wan expression.
He rushed to the hallway and up the second flight of stairs. The skylight was closed, and no rainwater was on the floor. No less anxious, he returned to the bedroom and contemplated the bleak prospect of a burst pipe between floors. Another note for Mr. Tommen was in order. The caretaker's cottage was dark. Its door was unfastened. Aiden creaked on the threshold and attracted the attention of a figure sitting in an armchair past an entry area. Face to face with the bereaved father, he could not bring himself to mention Bray by name. He waved his silly note and bumbled to explain the leak. Mr. Tommen's coloring could only be described as tragic. He explained,
There aren't any pipes over your bedroom.
"The water spot is huge. It has been seeping for over an hour. I'm surprised you didn't see it." The caretaker stared curiously.
The bedroom door was closed. I assumed you were asleep.
Aiden corrected the impression. "The door was open. You would have seen the bed and the leak from the hall when you checked the light bulb."
I checked no light bulb.
Interrupted Andrew.
I checked the mousetraps and saw that a circuit had tripped in the fuse box and reset it. Sleep in the guest room tonight. Fresh linen is in the chest of drawers. I will check the leak tomorrow.
Aiden felt foolish for his complaint, so withdrew. In retreat, he shuddered to realize that perhaps Mr. Tommen was aware of his acquaintance with his daughter, and that the odious detective may have mentioned to him that the new tenant
was the prime suspect. There was also Bray's drawing on the refrigerator to consider. He was halfway up the block when he heard hard-soled shoes gaining on him. Looking over his shoulder, he was surprised to see the caretaker catching up. "I will sleep in the guest room," Aiden volunteered heroically. "It can wait until tomorrow."
No,
mumbled Andrew.
it's better I do it now.
No other words were shared between the two. Mr. Tommen charged upstairs to the guest room. The resident heard him enter the secret passageway behind the closet, and then the crawl space, accessible from it. A minute later, he was over the bed in the ceiling. The caretaker did not carry a flashlight, so knees and palms were pictured blindly thumping along the planks until all went quiet. When this quiet stretched beyond a sensible duration, Aiden traced the man's path into the passageway and called up into the dark hatchway. "Hello, Mr. Tommen?" With no response being given, the resident returned to his bedroom in a state. Both pieces of the sleeping tablet were on the bathroom basin where he left them. No, he groaned, realizing the clever trick perpetrated against him. They had gotten to him by other means. The antihistamine, the antacid. Neither knife blade nor marble had dropped into the plate because he precipitously extinguished the candle on the bed table when Amber called. The wick was hastily relit to restart the clock, and the lamp switched off. Pushing the camcorder aside, Aiden recoiled on feeling its warm casing. It was in record mode. In transition from bulb to flame, tallow shadows of the candle slipped sluggishly into unfamiliar grooves. A snapping flicker directed Aiden's attention again to the water spot on the ceiling, which began to move in time with more squeaking planks. The discoloration was abruptly a shadow, one somehow cast from below by the candlelight. Moisture made the ceiling plaster permeable to light, but the shimmering outline somehow belonged to Mr. Tommen, still in the crawl space. He was about to speak the caretaker's name again when the dark form moved intelligently, as by rotation, until the foreshortened silhouette of a man was its one undeniable feature. Its legs were not stationary, but swaying. Cringing, the painter picked up on a second outline between the bedposts at the footboard. It moved under the same influence as the flame. When he dared to look, the ghastly reflection of Jacques Chrétien stared back at him from the dresser mirror. The gray dwarf creaked at the end of a rope tied to the ceiling light. Urine dribbled over his briefs and knees and splattered on the bedspread. Aiden careened into the recorder's tripod. Man and contraption fell banging to the floor with a scream. Jacques was no longer in the mirror. No shadow or any other discernible mark remained on the ceiling. Wisp of hot vanilla scent rose off the candle, and were late bringing the ceramic plate to his attention. Marble and knife blade now sat in it. During his meltdown in Chapter 18, Aiden leaps to a series of assumptions. And in Chapter 20, he gives voice to these assumptions. A dark current pushes him along. The Unsayable, Part 2. Trembling, Aiden snuffed out the candle wick and righted the tripod, yet remained unconvinced he was awake. He had not heard the marble or razor blade fall on the plate, but surely they had. Regardless, Jacques' tape, Philo de Se, was as frightening an image as he should ever care to see. As with his previous recording, he believed the tape he selected had an earlier history, a recorded-over event. The video cassette was taken downstairs, and on inserting it into the VCR, rewound with dread. A blink preceded an unpromising black screen, but then the flashing 12 on the bedside clock appeared. The videographer had succeeded in copying over the tape. Several seconds of fast-forwarding through the murky footage turned up nothing else. No plausible explanation could explain why a clock face should show up in a recording and nothing else.
The videotape was ejected and tossed onto the heap with the others, leaving Aiden to charge back upstairs in a tear. He shouted, "Show yourselves!"
Incensed, the resident was on the point of pacing when he spied,
through window curtains,
a dark blue Lincoln Town car parked across the street. The car itself was not what stopped his action. It was the man inside, Police Detective Herod Pincher.
It's just as Omar said it would be. The moment Aiden started nosing around for their methods of surveillance, they sent Count Dracula in a squad car to cow him.
The set-upon man stormed down the stairs and out the front door. He was at the vehicle before the detective could react. Pincher donned a new costume, this time made up to resemble an iridescent green Frankenstein.
The painter crackled with sarcasm. "Going to another Halloween party, are we?"
"Ah, Mr. Gage,"
responded the detective. Out of his element, Herod was not used to addressing people while seated in a car. He struggled to step from the passenger door. The taller man stood so close it was difficult to rise with his customary gracefulness. Inadvertently, he bumped his prosthetic skullcap against the doorframe. It partially separated from his forehead and revealed a strip of unpainted skin underneath.
"Yes,"
he began again.
"you gave me a start. I was hoping to find you home."
The reply he received was barely intelligible. "You wicked people! Where are your cameras?" The detective reeled at the effrontery.
"Mr. Gage, aren't you yourself?"
Aiden grabbed at one of the detective's fake neck bolts. "Are those microphones?" Pincher brushed his hand away.
"Sir, if you were still a suspect, your mental state would be of concern to our investigation. As it is, I have not come to harass you, but to inform you that you are no longer under suspicion. We have our perpetrator."
"What perpetrator?"
"The man who kidnapped and, in all likelihood, murdered the caretaker's child. It was none other than the graduate student Jacques Chrétien. It has all come together today with his blood sample turning up at our mortuary."
Aiden rolled his eyes as one absurdity was heaped upon another. "What do you mean? Jacques works for you. I bet the whole lot of you are having a good laugh at my expense."
"I can assure you, Mr. Gage, Mr. Chrétien is dead and is most probably our culprit,"
he added crisply.
"I myself am not inclined to find humor in these matters."
The artist was caught between conflicting realities. "What do you want me to say to this?"
"I require nothing of you, sir. I will, however, apprise you of the facts. The blood we found on the sheet tears from your trash was indeed a match to your DNA and did not match the sample we found on the victim's bedroom window screen. So you were never a strong candidate as a suspect. As for Mr. Chrétien, he had bandaged fingers, and it was his blood found at the crime scene. He likely encountered the child at his furtive place of employment, Peekaboo Putt-Putt, where he formed the design on her."
Aiden scoffed. "Then where is she? Where's Bray?"
"We have yet to find a body."
"That's because there isn't one." The detective's eyebrows curled.
"You waste my time, Mr. Gage, with this trifling conspiracy."
The painter laughed. "I hope there will be monetary compensation in this for me, playing the prize full in your TV show." Laughter was answered with brittleness.
"You are no fool, Mr. Gage. Your artwork is the product of a morose imagination. This goes without saying. Perhaps it vents your darker impulses? In which case, I hope you continue painting. As for Mr. Chrétien, perhaps his talent was not as developed as yours. It is possible living too long as an outsider in stone's throw affected his mental state.
Pincher latched onto the car door handle, adding,
Small towns tend to amplify perversions of one type or another. It is worth remembering. I advise you not to stay too long here, as others have. I would not wish to see you end up worse for the experience.
Aiden was not ready to release the man. What about Emma? Is she involved?
The young woman has been an unfortunate victim in this, Mr. Gage. The recipient of unsolicited phone calls.
But the tape.
Tape?
Pincher bristled with surprise.
How do you know of a tape?
I heard your men gabbing about her being on a tape. The detective spoke disapprovingly.
You have leapt to another conclusion, sir.
He commented indirectly on it.
Being a performance artist was a clever means for the deceased man to case houses. Many of the tapes found in his trailer appeared to have been stolen. Their labels were removed to conceal their identity in among those tapes he legitimately employed in his graduate study.
It was then turned another way.
You see, Mr. Gage, no matter how well or poorly conceived a criminal act is, more consequences are generated by it than can be anticipated or intended.
Aiden was already fading from the door, providing the functionary with an opportunity to drop in his seat. Once planted there, he remembered another reason for his visit and rolled down the door window, handing over a stack of twine-bound papers.
These are yours, Mr. Gage. One of my overzealous officers collected them during our examination of your premises.
More incredulity was expressed in accepting the offering. The detective probed the papers curiously.
Those appear to be schematics for a secret room.
You mean a secret box, reproached Aiden. You should know that better than I. The detective shrugged off the curtness.
One critical page is missing,
he observed.
Otherwise, it would have been of interest to me.
With this strange obiter dictum, the man turned over the ignition key and mumbled with forced politeness,
I bid you good day, sir.
The wounded man lashed out one last time. Tell the people at Fox I'll be looking for a check in the mail. Pincher's face crinkled, doing further damage to his savaged face paint.
Your discourteousness does you no credit, Mr. Gage. Mind you, we will be keeping an eye on you.
At the moment he pulled away from the curb, the galling television news van, still prowling the neighborhood, was spotted down the block. The vehicle abruptly started up and drove off after the detective's car. Aiden ran after it with his arms in the air, yelling, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Being in nothingness was several blocks out of the way to Emma's house, but the battered suitor reasoned a cup of coffee would calm and refocus him. It was a tortured bit of melodrama on his part, his leaving her that morning when it was clear she did not want him to leave. In truth, she could be forgiven for construing his absence as a form of punishment or abandonment or both. A bigger man, a man with less pride, would have stuck it out with her in her hour of need, but it was a weaker man who did not act, and it was a foolish man who left her to seek solace in another man. Regardless, Aiden needed more than wanted to see Emma. Given how he left it with her, it might well be a bumpy encounter, and given his present state of mind, it could not have been more ill-timed. He was forever putting himself in situations where he needed to act out of desperation, rather than on agreeable terms. The suitor could not think what he would say to her. There was something inherently inferior,
and in the way about words, but he was compelled to fill up the air with the tin ring of them. Still, he knew firsthand it was not always about words and love.
He might find courage to ask a woman out and wind for a 3-hour conversation over dinner.
Yet, he was never able to figure out how to take it to the next level, or even if there was a next level. A second date would be more of the same, and a third date would be too painful to endure. In the end, he blamed the woman for not facilitating in language what he found impossible to say. The painter found himself hogtied and neutered by his own ineffectual discourse, and the woman,
having no true romantic regard for him, he believed,
made into friendship what she surely knew he never intended to be friendship. Once in high school, he gave a girl he dearly, secretively loved a daisy when she returned to school still speechless from a bout of laryngitis. He never attempted up to then to advance their flirtation, and sometimes pointedly ignored her out of fictitious wounds. At the time, he believed his simple gesture of a flower required no embarrassing explanation, though the long look the two shared in the transaction was like tripping over the key to a code. No boldness was intended by his offering, but he could not deny he said more to her in those silent seconds than he ever said before, or would ever say again. He intellectually understood the dimension of nonverbal communication, but intellectually was the only sense in which he could embody it. Arriving at the coffee house, he saw truculent Erica at the counter. She was pulling a double shift. A very married Seth Bowles cooed over her in a very public way. The sight of them together was nauseating, but given the establishment was dramatically empty, there was no escaping the awkward logistics. The professor was just as eager to avoid an encounter with the painter, so passed him without comment to the door.
Erica began preparing the patron's drink for a second time that day, and twanged in her nasally Midwestern tone.
Where have you been hiding?
Aiden threw her an impervious look, but it was spread too thinly over his face. The barista glared through contrails of steaming milk. He did not want to be drawn back into it, but was in a snit.
You know nothing about us,
she challenged.
About him.
He answered, I know Seth Bowles is a self-centered man who's been pampered and placated his whole life like a spoilt child.
How does that make him different from any other man?
She asked hotly. That's a cynical excuse to justify your enabling his bad behavior.
No,
she rejoined.
That's knowing the lay of the land.
Well, there's a wife on this landscape, he reminded her.
She's an invalid. She's never been in the picture.
Are you so naive to think you can come between them? You will never be more than a trophy to him in good times, and a crutch in bad. She shot back.
And which are you, a trophy or a crutch?
He was thrown. She saw his surprise.
Surely you've seen the engagement ring on Emma's finger.
Air escaping Aiden's lungs was audible. The barista's bracelet chimed with the plop of the to-go cup on the countertop.
Looks like we both want to be homewreckers.
Forgetting his drink again, the patron turned red-faced to the door.
He charged up the block, resolved only to return to the house. The image of Emma's knuckle grazing his on the table at the restaurant the day before flashed vividly across his mind. But he had seen the ring prior to this. Aiden was precisely the sort of person who would map out every contour of a beautiful woman's face and fail to notice she was conspicuously betrothed to another man. Being an artist did not make him more observant, only impaired with a peculiar form of nearsightedness. At the very least, Emma's virtue had been rescued from his overactive imagination, but at the price of being locked away, and nothing could make him love a woman more than knowing she could never be his. It was less reckless to pine after a woman who was unattainable than one who was merely promiscuous. He would not be required to agonize over her sullied virtue, only pat himself on the back for not asking her to forsake a higher principle on his behalf. Yet where was the higher principle in failing to mention she was engaged? As always, his dented ego was of two minds on interpreting a woman's actions. Seeing Emma's unstinting enthusiasm for his company, he could only conclude she was either the most heartless, ignoble woman he ever met, or having formed an attachment for him, she had delayed her revelation so to cement their new bond and place it beyond amendment or repeal. Either way, she had been pulling him along from the beginning, and on non-negotiable terms he would be the last to know. Aiden's overstretched brain had systematically shut down over the course of the trying day, taking with it motor strength, coordination, and present-term memory. Regardless, he was not so preoccupied to fail and noticed the street was darker going back than coming. He blearily drew a bead on a Cadillac ambulance parked up the block past the quadrangle. More specifically, the coruscating faces of jack-o'-lanterns peering out its rear window concerned him. The resident walked by the spectacle, waist-high in a plot, and looked around late on hearing feet kick up in dead leaves. Dark figures shuffled on and off porches with more stolen lanterns, betraying the antics of fraternity boys. The accidental spectator slowed on completing the puzzle, yet gathered it was a bad idea to show any reaction. One of the pranksters stood in a yard across the street with him, dead in sight. His frightening mask did more than hide his identity. It drew out a primal predator stare. Aiden quickened his stride, and seeing he was not going to be accosted, turned the corner. One prominent jack-o'-lantern was seen from the bottom of the hill, the one shining from Emma's apartment window. Backlit against it, two figures stood on her porch. It was impossible to say whether they were leaving or just arrived. The bedraggled suitor plodded up the steep cement steps to where the resident talked, and recognized her fellow interlocutor as Tanner, the artist friend from the coffee house. The appearance of the older man at the foot of the porch ended whatever conversation preceded it, leaving the stone-faced photographer looking down without greeting.
Tanner studied the painter, as well as Emma's complex reaction to him.
Well,
He awkwardly concluded.
I should be going.
She acknowledged his leave-taking with a passable smile. While she watched her friend depart in silence, Aiden took stock of her hard day. The lemony zephyr from that morning was gone, and in its place was a drab, mossy frock buried under his cardigan. The sweater's raggedness matched her ill-tended makeup. Once Tanner merged with the dark sidewalk below, Emma turned brusquely into her apartment. Aiden tarried in the doorway where the pumpkin on the end table illuminated several packing boxes from upstairs. Alarmed, he slumped to the darker bedroom to find her wrestling with a large suitcase on the bed. Hearing his footsteps, she made an announcement. "I'm leaving school, Aiden." His script, if he had one, was out the window. "Why?" The girl glanced back, raising an eyebrow at his show of feeling. "Why? Because I didn't bargain for this." She resumed stuffing things into her case. "Jacques is gone," he countered. "He will no longer bother you. He will soon be forgotten." The man did not take her meaning. Emma turned to sit on the dim bed. The ring on her finger was more visible in shadow than it ever was in daylight. "I'm engaged," she admitted. "I'm engaged to be married. That's what I wanted to tell you in my studio, and again this morning." Though he expected to hear the words, they nonetheless pushed into his veins like poison. "Evan is his name," she went on. "That was him I was talking to last night on the phone when you happened on me." Aiden listed in the doorway. "It's as well it ends here," she continued calmly. "I thought we would be friends, but it's clear we can't be friends." The suitor glanced over to see most of the beautiful gowns removed from the walk-in closet. A portmanteau, already fastened, presumably contained the bulk of her wardrobe. Those dresses of his acquaintance were set aside for different accommodations. Each article was being packed away with a layer of tissue paper, but the designated piece of luggage seemed a hasty and inadequate selection for their travel. He needed to answer her, needed a cri de coeur. "I don't have friends," he explained. She crackled. "The way you cleared out of here this morning, it doesn't surprise me." "No," he mumbled. She did not take his meaning. Emma stood up and closed the lid on the suitcase. "It's been a rough day. Please leave." Howling instantly erupted beyond the drizzly windowsill. Someone ran across the backyard. The frat house raiders were assaulting another block of houses. "Leave," she repeated forcefully. Creaking, intrusive footsteps arose behind where the painter teetered on a precipice, footsteps undoubtedly drawn to the porch by the lantern in the window. "I have no friends," he again intoned. "Goodbye, Aiden." The candlelight wavered at his back. The front door was left open. With retreat cut off, the roused draft nudged him forward. "You don't understand," he said. "What's to understand?" The only light in the house snuck away on tiptoe, and the blackness placed him urgently at her elbow. He seized the zipper on the suitcase and, undoing the flap, began flinging gowns to the floor. His voice was stronger. "You don't understand." Something was unleashed in him, something barely started. "You don't understand," he cried. Emma, astonished, dropped to the corner of the bed. At the end of his outburst, the suitcase was empty, and tears flowed freely down his cheeks. Aiden was dull and keen at the same time. Somewhere between her warm body and the cold dark that engulfed them. He wanted to apologize, but was too incapacitated to speak. Gravity pulled him to the floor, where the dresses were now arrayed at her feet. His arms, of their own accord, encircled her waist as a final fixed point. He chanted the words once more. "You don't understand." Emma eased slowly, like a stack of wobbly cups and saucers, struggling to stay aligned. Then, when she had completely exhaled, her body yielded to accept the embrace. "I do understand, Aiden," her voice quietly broke. "I don't want to be your friend either." She turned a tuft of his hair, and after a minute spoke again. "Go close the front door. You left it open." Aiden rose as an empty vessel to re-enter the front of the unlit apartment. The exterior door squeaked on its hinges in the chill, but the pumpkin, with its extinguished candle, was still on the table. He locked the door and retraced his steps to Emma's side.